Welcome to The Culture. We rest at the pulse of the community, providing all things news, music, fashion, events, and everything that we talk about in between. It's a lifestyle. We are The Culture.
Hello and welcome to The Culture. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm your host, Jessica Garrett Modkins. So great to have friend to the show, Dr. Steve Gallen, join us this morning, Vice Chair for Miami-Dade County Public Schools. Good morning or good afternoon,
Good
Dr.
morning,
Gallen.
Jessica. How you doing? How's everything going?
Oh, it's going well, going well. A lot is going on, and I'm so appreciative that you are at the table of what is transpiring. I want to go and talk and start out talking about FHSAA, Florida High School Athletic Association. You attended a meeting, some things transpired. You said that you were going to make a recommendation that Miami-Dade County Public Schools will withdraw, and that has pretty much erupted in the dismantling of the entire association without our talented athletes. Am I getting it correct? What has happened? Explain to us what's going on.
Well, we've not gotten to that particular point, but I think your perception of the eruption is accurately articulated. I was not at the meeting, actually. I was actually traveling, and I got word that the meeting occurred on Monday, past Monday, and their meeting addressed the start of fall sports. They voted 10-5 to start fall sports on August 27th. During that particular period of time, not only was the state of Florida at the apex of the COVID-19 confirmed cases, but Miami-Dade County and South Florida in general was at the apex across the state. We broke records in terms of the number of cases. But irrespective of that science, that data, and Jessica, even the own recommendation of their sports advisory medicine committee, they voted 10-5 to move forward with a date of July 27th. What that said to us, once again, is that they had no real consideration for the challenges that we were facing here, that they had no real consideration or compassion for fair and equitable participation of our student athletes. Fair and equitable means we all have an equal opportunity, and we have an equitable opportunity with respect to preparation, schedule, practices, etc. And enough is enough. So at that particular point, when they took that vote of 10-5 to move forward, regardless of what kind of hell we were catching down here and are still catching here, I made a declaration that I would be putting forth an item to look at withdrawing from the Florida High School Athletic Association. This has been a part, potentially of a whisper campaign for maybe decades, but nobody has ever filed from a formal position of leadership and action to say, let's just withdraw. The Florida High School Athletic Association has been around since 1920. It started in Gainesville, Florida. A group of principals in Gainesville, Florida in 1920 started the association. So they've been around over 100 years. Their obligation is to represent all of us in the state of Florida as it relates to our children in interscholastic sports. And that vote, once again, said that representation came up short. We heard them loud and clear, so it was time for them to hear from us. And I was very proud that although I was the conduit once again, my colleagues across the state, in Central Florida, in Southwest Florida, in Leon County, a lot of them joined in the chorus to say enough is enough. And they were willing to stand with us. That stand, that voice, that shout called the Florida High School Athletic Association to call an emergency meeting a few days later, and they discussed it again, and they cast another vote to walk back that initial position that they had, and that vote was 11-4 to now extend it, consider South Florida, take the recommendation of their advisory committee, and do the right thing by our student athletes. That being said, I do plan to move forward with my item which is due today. It will be published tomorrow, and I actually finished it this morning. So we are not done with that discussion. This is my third dance with them, and it continues to be a dance of disrespect, disregard, and dismissive of what we contribute financially, but what our students contribute athletically as well.
Thank you for always having a seat at the table. And I want to move into another area of disruption. We're going to get into the reopening of schools in a minute, but I want to touch base on this with you. And I want to remind you, last summer, I gave you a call. I said, the Miami Herald is calling me. They're talking about the anniversary of the Black boycott here in Miami. And I want to talk to them about the disparities that still exist to this day with Black-owned businesses that are not getting their fair share. And you told me, Jessica, yes, you are accurate in that assertion. Now, last night, let me pull this up. Last night, let us begin with the end in mind. That was a quote from you. And that was in regards to, once again, the disparities of Black-owned businesses that are registered and who are qualified to do business with Miami-Dade County Public Schools not being able to have a seat at the table and have their equitable share of business being able to perform duties for the school board, especially right now during COVID, when you are spending upwards of over $1 million on supplies and Black businesses are not at the table. Tell me about your exchange last night. Bring those up to speed with who did not get to see the school board meeting.
Yes, last night during the actual reopening presentation, yes, we're talking about technology. Yes, we're talking about starting times. We're talking about distance learning. But within the framework of that presentation, we're talking about making purchases. And those purchases was not $1 million, $5 million. The allocation on one particular budget was upwards of $20 million. A $20 million allocation of revenue for purchases relative to COVID-19 and the return to schools. We currently have policies on the books. There are provisions to make emergency purchases and kind of navigate through or bypass, in some cases, the regular procurement and bidding processes because we're under emergency. But this emergency does not allow me or the board to abdicate our obligation, or even the superintendent to abdicate our obligation and commitment to this community with respect to our current school board policies, our current public position, and quite frankly, doing the right thing for underserved and underrepresented groups based on a disparity study that said Blacks have not gotten their fair share. So this is not what Steve Gallen said in 2016. This is not what I said since I've gotten elected. This was a disparity study that certified and confirmed that Blacks were not getting a fair share of business opportunities in the Miami-Dade County Public Schools. This board has been committed to that work. The superintendent has been committed to that work. But that commitment, Jessica, has to run throughout the organization. It has to run throughout the organization. Yes, we're elected school board members. He's the superintendent, but it has to translate into actionable outcomes for people who are not represented in business opportunities. So what I said is, if there's $20 million, let's take a page out of Stephen Covey's theory of action. Begin with the end in mind. What is the end? When that money is spent, let's look at what will be the portion that Blacks have gotten, that women have gotten, that underrepresented groups have gotten out of that $20 million.
And that's just one item.
That's one. So let's not wait until it's already done and then we're talking about what we didn't do. Let's start right now. So I got some answers relative to their awareness, but the awareness was insufficient for me. And what I said is, I don't want you to simply be aware. I don't want you to be concerned. What are we doing about it? So although the time was limited to continue that discourse, it was very, very clear that I'm coming on that conversation. That conversation is just beginning, and I've had an opportunity to follow up individually with the superintendent. He shares the same sentiments, but we want to make sure that our sentiments that are shared translates into business opportunities and dollars earned by Black companies in Miami-Dade County under every circumstance, not with just construction, not with just certain areas, but if we have an allocation for COVID-19 through revenue that's coming from the federal government or the state, we need our fair share. And we're going to make sure that that happens. And I'm not going to be silent about that at all, at all.
Yes. Thank you for that. And you said, long as you know I'm coming, long as you know.
Yeah, I said, I'm coming.
I appreciate that as a small business owner. And I thank you on behalf of all of us who don't have a seat at the table to be represented. That was great. And we expect for them to do the right thing and figure it out.
Yeah, and I just have to say this quickly. As an elected official, as a leader, we have to be prepared, we have to be engaged, and we have to understand what's going on. So when I got an answer last night that the firms who have gotten businesses are certified, for some people that may be like, okay, certification is not what we're talking about. We're talking about minority certified, Black-owned businesses. Every business can be certified, but it could be a group that is not, has a history of deprivation. So I'm not going to allow people to parse words with me, to give me certain statements that will pacify me in the midst of a public discourse. We have to drill down into what we're talking about and be unapologetically that I'm having a conversation about Black-owned businesses, period.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's good. That's good. So what is going to be the follow-up for this? Are you waiting for the financial officer to get back to you on how they're going to allocate, justify, reconcile? What's the next step with that question that you asked?
I want a plan of action on what we're going to do. Reconciliation for me, Jessica, is after the fact. You're going to reconcile what you've already done. That's the whole notion that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So reconciliation is what happened at the Florida High School Athletic Association. They had already made a decision because we weren't at the table, obviously. We weren't represented or we didn't have the numbers. So now they had to come back and overturn what they initially did. So reconciliation on a $20 million opportunity would be reconciling what has already been spent. So I don't want to look at this after the fact. I said begin with the end in mind. Let's start with what we want to see when it's all said and done. And to make that determination, we have to have an intentional, a deliberate, a very pragmatic, and quite frankly, a public plan of action. What are we trying to buy? Who we're going to reach out to buy it from?
And so that's what they were charged with, determining and coming back.
That's the expectation, and that's the conversation that I'm going to continue to lean in very strongly. We had a limited amount of time on yesterday because, again, it was in the context of reopening, but there's committee next week, and there's a board meeting the week after.
Okay.
As I said, I'm coming. I'm not going anywhere.
So we'll be keeping close to that.
Absolutely.
Over the next
if businesses are out there that have a market opportunity for goods and services that are related to the pandemic, reach out to the Miami-Dade County Public Schools Office of Economic Opportunity. Reach out to them. And if you have any problem getting through, give us a call, 995-1334. And we'll make sure that you're connected with the right people, because what I don't want people to come back and say that we didn't have the people to provide the goods. And I know that is not the case. We have people out there who can provide masks, who can provide plexiglass, who can provide hand sanitizer. We have those people out there that are underrepresented groups, and they need an opportunity, and not after the fact.
That's right. Okay, so let's move into reopening. All parents were on pins and needles last night trying to see where we were going to end. And I'll let you do the honors. Where are we?
We're going to reopen schools a week later, August 31st. We're initially scheduled for August 24th, according to the board-approved calendar. We're going to move to the 31st for our students, and the first phase will be distance learning. The entire district will be under distance learning. I did appreciate to a greater extent that the district and the superintendent and his team contemplated a phased approach. I know some other districts have already made a declaration that we're going to be distance learning from now until January. But because of the fluidity of the COVID-19 cases, you may make a declaration for distance learning in August, and maybe let's say late October, everything is back to normal, that we are below the 5% or the 10% thresholds that say it's safe for us to go back to school. Knowing that we're in the business of education, we have to maintain our integrity about what we know is the best practice to deliver instruction to our students, especially those who are fragile, who are ELL, and who are special needs. And the best methodology, the best mode of delivery is face-to-face. So I thought it was prudent not to totally abandon that through January, but to keep that option open in a very phased and staggered way. So we will start out with distance learning August 31st. Very, very pleased that some of the initiatives that I filed, specifically most recently, the parent training component was embedded in the reopening plan. So our parents are going to have an opportunity to be trained on not only the technology aspect, but also organizational aspect. People are still on pins and needles, Jessica. I'll tell you right now, I've gotten calls from parents who, although they understand that a decision has been made, we still have families that have to work, that don't know what they're going to do, but we have an obligation to give them timely notice so that they can prepare. All districts to the north of us have already declared distance learning. And right now, that's kind of the condition under which we're in. And hopefully this thing moves to some type of an improved resolution, because our babies, our children, our young people need to be physically in schools, but we can't bring them back in a way that is not safe and that is not smart.
I also have been receiving calls and emails on the generic term, I believe NBC has coined it as pandemic pods, where there is a group of parents that come together, hire an instructor, and they are going forward with their own classification of schooling. I'm concerned because I see that there is going to be this gap between the have and the have-nots, meaning those people who have the ability to pay upwards of $1,000 per child to have this one-on-one type of instructional learning, and then of course they're withdrawing their children from schools. What do you say to those parents who have those concerns about the quality of education that will happen under this type of plan?
I share the same concern. One of the things about being true to your core as a person is that you don't have to give a whole lot of contemplation to questions like that, because you're going to go back to your core. I've been pretty consistent in my conviction and my paradigm relative to these kind of issues. So what am I saying? In sum, back to what I've said to you before, I've said it to the media, and I'll continue to say it. When things are bad in our community, state, nation, and world, things are even worse for people who are poor, minority, and Black. So absolutely, our underserved communities, our Black communities, our poor communities, our Latino communities, in some regards, are going to be victims of an even wider gap. The achievement gap is real. We don't talk about it very often. We don't talk about it as often enough. We talk about school letter grades, but in the context of school letter grades, we have lingering, stubborn, persistent achievement gaps in terms of how Black children progress versus white children's progression, how poor children progress versus those from affluent communities. And that gap is real. And I think this is going to further widen that gap. And what you indicated is very obvious, that where the public is not able to do it, people who rely on public schools, people who don't have the resources, are going to be left behind those additional opportunities. People who have the means are going to do whatever they need to do within their means, within their wealth, within their influence, within their knowledge base, to make sure that their children get what they need. And again, that's going to create a further divide, a further gap between the haves and the have-nots in our community, state, nation, and world.
So let me take you back. You profited a resolution on learning for parents it passed, they worked it into the plan. Is that what the August 24th Welcome Week for parents consists of, that
Yes,
training?
yes, that will be a part of that initial training and orientation. But it is my expectation, and I articulated it last evening, being an educator, being a trainer myself in some cases, we can't have a one-shot deal. So what we hope is that parents will continue to have the support on an ongoing basis. I shared last evening that from March to June, my fallback position was always 305-995 help. If you got a problem, call that number. Right now, that's great, but that was a centralized number. That was at the district. What I hope to see is that parents are able to access the support, the resources, and the assistance at their school, because our principals are going to be available, our staff should be available, so we now have time, unlike the time we didn't have in March. And I believe that parents will get better services and supports if they're in close proximity to where their children are. I believe in the law of proximity. People who are closest to the issue have the best opportunity to resolve it. So it is an expectation that during that particular time, parents will have initial orientation, but it is also an expectation and good practice that parents will be able to get that ongoing support as they would with any issue. My child is having an issue with his lunch number. They can call the school and go there under regular circumstances. My child is having a problem with his homework. They can go to the school and get support under normal circumstances. I, as a parent, am having a challenge with the distance learning platform. They should equally be able to go to the school and get that support, or contact the school to get that support, because now there's a training component. And training is not, I give it to you and I'm gone. Training in real practice is ongoing support, assistance, and intervention.
And with the mentioning of it being, of our students now being online, is that going to be something that is district wide, where there is going to be a systematic way of instruction, or is that left up to each individual school, whether or not teachers give a packet of work and they're to turn it in, and they might have 2 days on Zoom for an hour with their teachers? Is it systematic or based on the school-to-school decision?
Excellent question, Jessica. What we now have transitioned into, and those were lessons learned from March to June. So you're absolutely right. You would have a teacher using Zoom, you would have another teacher using a different platform. So you had a myriad of platforms, technological platforms for delivering education. And that was good in the interim, but it created some significant challenges. You had some teachers that were doing something 2 days a week, some teachers doing it 3 days a week, some teachers doing it 5 days a week. I, as a parent, know I had a 3-day a week, 4-day a week schedule for my daughter. But right now we are moving forward to consistency. 5 days a week, full schedule, one platform. It's going to be K through 12 learning with over 1,200 subjects within that particular program. That's one of the programs, one of 2 programs approved by the state, and K through 12 online is what the district will be moving forward with. So your child will be using the same platform as my child and your neighbor's child. And so it's not from one teacher, from one school to the next. It's going to be consistency across the district.
Okay, and then the teachers would have to be, is that something that they're already up to speed on, or is there going to be an onboarding process for them? Okay.
As a part of that August 24th training cycle, that will also include teachers. And there's also some discussion about probably moving that up, because teachers are ready to get familiar with something that's new. So, I mean, that is a reality. It's a new platform for our teachers. It's a new process for our district, but there will be training that will precede its implementation.
And then those teachers, where will they be? Will they be at home, or will they be on the school grounds?
That was a question that came up last night. The superintendent did indicate that they will be discussing that in particular with the unions. I know there was a declaration made once that was announced, but it is an expectation that employees will be accountable. I said I had some concerns from March through June, and I was asked that question came up. I lean into my position. I don't just say it in private, I say it in public. Whatever decision is made, it has to be equitable. And what I mean by that, from March to June, custodians had to show up, food service workers had to show up for meal distribution, and a lot of employees were not accountable. They were not present, and principals had to show up. And in this particular case, I will say our teachers were really accountable, because at least our teachers had to teach students. So whether they were home or wherever they were, at least they had times that they had to show up for some Zoom cycles. Now, that varied from some subjects, from one subject to the other. So your reading, your language arts, your math, your core teachers, they always will be at the front of the line. But there were some other subjects that, quite frankly, may not have been practical online. So if you're talking about auto mechanic or auto body or welding, that's a course that's required. But to the extent that the teacher could have been fully engaged through a Zoom or distance learning without the resources, without the tools and the practice, it may have been very impractical. So this platform should provide a better avenue for that. But my only call is to make it equitable and make it fair. And I don't want to see one group of employees relegated to certain obligations while others are not. We have to make it fair. We must be compassionate. We must be considerate. Obviously, if you have employees with underlying conditions, that has to be contemplated first and foremost. But I think we have time now to be involved in a deeper dive and a deeper discourse around what that looks like. But as these employees report to the superintendent and the superintendent reports to the board, he will be working with the unions with those particular issues about where they will report. But my conviction as a board member is accountability and equity and fairness for all employees.
Food insecurities.
Yes.
Are we going to be able to say to parents that you will be able to drive up or walk and grab lunch for your child?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The food provision, an item and an issue that has been close to my heart. As you know, I was the one that subsequent to the hurricane proffered the first item, and now that has become a national practice. Before then, in Dade County, if schools are closed, children go hungry. There was no consideration, there was no contemplation prior to that to feed children during mandatory closures. We took that position, we launched that initiative, it went across the state, and now that is a national practice. So I don't know if I'll ever get national credit for it, but I know God sees all.
Right.
We will continue that through a grab and go, a very safe and secure way to make sure that our children have breakfast and lunch as appropriate, consistent with our obligation under the National School Lunch Program, and quite frankly, our obligation to make sure our children have what they need in terms of nourishment and food.
Okay. Was there any thought process as to the requirement of students wearing uniforms while on Zoom?
That will be that wasn't discussed at the district level. At the macro level, that is a school related decision, a school related issue. I know that that was an expectation from various schools that at least the children should be in appropriate attire. And I agree. I don't think a child should be attending Zoom in pajamas or inappropriate attire, as we would not allow that in a school setting. And Zoom is still an opportunity for students to see each other. But those kind of decisions and management and accountability measures have to be taken at the school site level, because we have over 300 plus schools and teachers and classrooms. And we trust our principals and our teachers to set the rules and expectations for participating in distance learning. We're using the term Zoom, but I think it's going to be, I know, distance learning, but it's going to be a different platform. But whatever those rules and requirements are, that has to be determined at the school site level, consistent with board policy for student attire, and implemented and managed by the teacher.
Yeah. Zoom has now become the Xerox of virtual
it. I mean,
conferences.
you got what, Cisco, you got WebEx, you got other stuff, but Zoom.
Google Meet. I know in Alachua County, they did all of their classrooms. They were actually already on Google Meet classrooms. Let's see. I had a couple of other questions for you, but I think we're almost out of time, and
already.
Yes. So it's always a good time with you.
Yes.
It was something that slipped me. I'm gonna just be so upset with myself that I can't remember. Any closing thoughts, Dr. Gallen?
No, just hope that everybody is staying safe and secure. We remain resolute in our commitment and our conviction to educating our children, providing for economic opportunity and parity for our businesses, and really supporting our parents and stakeholders in this work. As I said, when we first entered into this initial phase of this very, very challenging pandemic, we will rise, but we have to rise together. My heart, prayers, and thoughts go out to the victims of COVID-19, those who are suffering and working through it. I pray for their strength and recovery. But my thoughts and prayers are also with the families of those who have lost their lives through this vicious cycle. And we just must stay safe. We must do all of the things that we need to do. Practice social distancing, wash our hands, and yes, wear your masks. I don't care what you think about it, wear your mask. This is serious, people, but as always, Miami-Dade County Public Schools and this community will get through it because this is who we are. But I believe in a bigger calling that we are part of a larger family, that family of humanity, and one that represents all of God's children. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us for this edition. Thank you, Dr. Gallen, always for your insight, wisdom, and courage to lead. And we thank you all for tuning in. Follow us on all social media platforms, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
The Culture is produced and owned by Hip Rock Star Media and cannot be reproduced or broadcast without written consent by Jessica Garrett Mutkins. All rights reserved 2020.